Hello band world, and welcome to episode 12 of Stuff Band Directors Wish They Had Time to Teach. I'm Stephen K. Bonham, your host, and I am a performing artist and educational clinician for Bach Trumpets, division of the Conn-Selmer Corporation, and an endorsing artist for Warburton Mouthpieces, a division of Warburton Music Products. Now, today's topic was requested by a viewer a couple of weeks ago, and I already had episode 11 planned out, so I asked him to hold off for a couple of weeks and I would address it, and today I'm addressing that topic. It is how to improve your tone and musicality. Now, there are a few different techniques. One is to remember that we do well what we do often, and if you are doing nothing but practicing technical studies and range and whatnot, then you're probably going to have limited improvement to your tone. So you need to be playing lyrical things. Now, fortunately, the world is full of lyrical things that you can play. You know, you can play selections from Broadway tunes, from opera, popular music you hear on the radio, you know, if it's a ballad or something lyrical. There are, books like one particular, In the Singing Style, by a gentleman named Phil Collins, not the singer and former drummer of Genesis. This gentleman is former principal trumpet of the Cincinnati Symphony. And he wrote a book called In the Singing Style, and we used it when I was an undergrad. And as memory serves, I think he pulled most of the material from opera and hymnals and whatnot. But you know, there are only so many tunes in the book, so eventually you're going to have played through everything several times. You'll be looking for something more, something new. Speaking of hymnals, that's also a good source for lyrical playing. Also, let's not overlook the Arbin book. There is a tune, in particular, I think the first one is called Robin Adair, and it's something like... just little simple melodies. And in fact, I think that one repeats, so when you take the repeat, change it up a bit. Again, keeping in mind that we do well what we do often. Of course, the obvious question is, how much of this should I do per day? Honestly, I do at least 10 to 15 minutes, especially at first, probably closer to 15 minutes, you know, if you're really trying to get a jump start on this. There are also other things like long tones. Schlossberg book, which is a very common book, a staple of the trumpet literature. It focuses on long tones. Again, I think a little of that goes a long way. You should do some, but I think you'll get more benefit from flow studies. You know, long connected moving lines. Charles Colin, he's got an excellent book, deals with flow studies. And then also get back to the human instrument, you know, the voice. You don't have to be a great singer, you know, you just have to be able to match things on pitch. But, you know, think of how a singer would sing a certain lyrical passage and then sing it, coming as close to the ideal in your head as you can imagine. Then try to match that on the horn. And over time, I think you'll find great improvement. And again, like I always say, make sure you record yourself. You know, back in the day, we had these tinny little cassette tapes, but even that, you know, we still got improvement from it. You know, with today, even just your basic smartphone microphone, you can get a fairly realistic rendition of what you sound like. And your ear is going to remember a good sound, and it's going to like it, and it's going to try to reproduce that sound in the future. So definitely give yourself a chance to sound, or to hear what you actually sound like, as opposed to what you think you sound like, you know, when your attention is divided with actually having to play the horn. You know, you record so you can sit back and focus the entirety of your attention just on the elements of your playing without the distraction of actually having to play. Now, additional source of melodies think I mentioned hymnals. I mentioned Collins' book, Simple Melodies from Arbon. It's German lieder, Schubert art songs. When I was in college, I would find out what some of the vocalists were singing out of, and I would get my own copy. And some of them came in these collections, that thick, almost like a phone book, but they were just tremendous little melodies. And they came with piano accompaniment, so sometimes, if I wanted to shake things up a bit, I'd grab an accompanist friend and, have them play through it. And the accompaniments they're always easy. And, boy, that would just really change the quality of it, hearing it with the accompaniment. But even just the melodies themselves, it just kept you from getting stale. Because, again, you want to mix things up, keep things fresh, so you're mentally alert. We never want to fall into a rut with any aspect of our playing, whether it's playing through the same old routine, the same etudes all the time, same solos. Always mix it up with new material and keep it fresh. Finally, make sure I'm not leaving anything out here. I think I've covered all the biggies. Finally, I want to talk about just basic music development and how that pertains to your tone and musicality. I wish it were the case, but it's not the case that, it's just a steady incline of improvement. It's almost like growth spurts. It happens in fits and starts, and sometimes you make a big leap, sometimes a little leap. Sometimes it actually feels like you take a step back. And it's that last bit I want to address. There were 2 times in my life when I was a senior in high school and a senior in college that I felt like I'd taken a step back, from the year before. And as it so happens, the same fellow was sitting next to me at both of these times, and he'd been listening to me play, since 8th or 9th grade. And I was just like, oh man, Scott, I feel like I'm in a slump. I feel like I'm playing worse than I did last year. Let's fly one into be in the show. Everybody wants to go Hollywood. Anyway, sorry. Scott was like, man, what are you talking about? You sound a lot better than you did last year. And I'm like, oh, well, geez, thanks. And I thought he was just being nice. Well, it turns out what had happened is what always happens is the first thing to make a big evolutionary leap is your ear training. Suddenly you're hearing intonation issues you never heard before. You think you were playing lyrically, but now you're able to hear with such a discerning ear that you're hearing imperfections you didn't hear before. You're still playing the way you always did. You're just hearing better. Now, inevitably, what happens is the rest of you catches up. So in this case, I just thought, well, I'm in a slump. Couldn't really figure it out, but I kept plugging away. And about 3 months later, I was like, oh, whew, glad I'm out of that slump. And felt like I started playing better again. And I guess in a way I was, because what had happened is that after that 3 months or so, my tone and musicality, just the rest of me, just finally caught up with my ear, where my ear made the leap first. So when that does happen, don't get discouraged. And of course, if you've kept these recordings and for some reason, you have taken a step back, try to figure out why. Is it something you're doing differently? Is there some physical problem that needs to be addressed? And again, I make these videos, in the absence of a good private teacher or to supplement that good private teacher. But that last part, I'll admit, is pretty difficult to do if you don't have access to a good private teacher. At the least, have your band director listen to you. And then, maybe they can draw on the resource, if they're not a trumpet player, of, an old classmate or, their own methods classes, or just, the advantage of, of being a educated musician, and they might be able to help you through that. Now, I realize I've kind of rushed through things here, such as trying to squeeze these topics into a roughly 10-minute format. So if there's anything you'd like for me to elaborate on, anything you're unclear about, please do not hesitate to contact me. Always available for consultation. And until next time, thank you for watching, and goodbye.